Hello, I'm Martin Landau.
I'm Barbara Bain. The new Space 1999 is more exciting than ever.
We have Catherine Schell as Maya, the Wonder Woman of science fiction.
And lots more.
Doctor Who fans can argue for hours over who was the best Doctor. James Bond aficionados have similar debates over the best actor to play 007. Star Trek fans can debate at length whether The Next Generation or the original series is the best Star Trek, a waste of time since obviously it's Deep Space Nine. Space 1999 fans, however, are faced with a debate that occurs in very few fandoms. Do you prefer the first or the second season?
What difference can it make?
To those unfamiliar with the series, this may sound a strange question, but most fans know that the two seasons are so different from each other as to be almost different shows entirely, and the story of how one became the other is yet another example of just how quickly things can go wrong behind the scenes. Space 1999 first aired in the autumn of 1975, but by this time it had been more than 6 months since filming had concluded on the first season. As they went their separate ways, the cast and crew certainly expected to be getting back to work again around August or September 1975. But as September came and went with no sign of a second season being commissioned, all involved began to believe that the series had been cancelled.
I refuse to believe we have no future.
During this downtime, Gerry Anderson assigned Space 1999 writer and script editor Johnny Byrne to provide a critical analysis that summed up the series' strengths and weaknesses in the hopes that, should a second season be commissioned, the production could learn from past mistakes going forward.
We're the kind of people who take note of public reaction, and we have listened to what they've had to say, because after all our job is to entertain.
Additionally, Byrne and fellow writer Donald James were also working on possible scripts, with James contributing The Exiles and Byrne The Biological Soul, eventually filmed as The Metamorph, Children of the Gods, which would never be made, and The Face of Eden, later to be filmed as The Immunity Syndrome. In late October 1975, ITC indicated to Anderson that they would be willing to go ahead with a second season, on one condition.
What condition?
That an American head writer be assigned to reformat the series for the American market, in the hopes of getting the crucial network sale that the first season had failed to achieve.
If we could get down to discussing
trade, I'm always ready to discuss trade.
Anderson agreed and headed to Los Angeles to interview potential candidates for the position. His eventual choice was a controversial one: Fred Freiberger. Freiberger's television writing career had begun in the 1950s and had encompassed such hit shows as Bonanza and Ironside, plus several Saturday morning cartoon series, while he had also held the role of producer on the first season of The Wild Wild West and, most importantly, the third season of Star Trek. The latter would seem to make him the most obvious choice to revamp Space 1999 with a more American flavour, although the third season of Star Trek had also been its last. This hadn't entirely been Freiberger's fault, since the season had also suffered from budget cuts, a poor time slot, and an unhappy cast and crew.
Only I could forget.
But there's also no denying that during his stewardship of Star Trek, the series produced some of its very worst episodes and scenes.
How can you let this go on?
Regardless, ITC seemed happy with the arrangement for about 5 minutes. Then they officially cancelled the show altogether.
Damn it.
In an eerily similar situation to the one Anderson had found himself in following the cancellation of UFO 2, he and Freiberger searched for a hook that would make the second season irresistible to ITC. That hook was to be the addition of a new alien character, the scientific genius Maya.
Oh, I thought it was a nice gesture.
I thought so too.
The bait was taken, and in mid-December 1975, Lou Grade announced that a second season of Space 1999 would indeed be entering production.
Oh, that is good news.
Since ensuring success with American audiences was even more of a concern than usual, while perhaps also looking to absolve himself of any blame should the changes to the show prove unpopular, Gerry Anderson offered Freiberger the role of producer, and he accepted.
I have a bad feeling.
On arriving in London, Freiberger had the opportunity to review 8 episodes of the first season and presented Anderson with a document containing his recommendations as to the changes he felt needed to be made. While hugely impressed with the look of the show, he felt the characters lacked warmth and personality, and that the series could only benefit from a more humorous approach to their relationships going forward.
Let's not take him.
However, his belief that the show's primary focus should be on its characters conflicted with one very important fact: he didn't actually like any of the characters. Thus, with the exceptions of Martin Landau and Barbara Bain, he proposed replacing the entire cast with younger and more dynamic characters. So, gone for good were Prentice Hancock as Paul Morrow, Clifton Jones as David Carno, and Suzanne Roquette as Tanya. Although none of the actors were actually fired, they just weren't asked back.
There's no need to state the obvious.
Despite apparently not being a hit with Freiberger, attempts were initially made to include Barry Morse's much-loved Professor Victor Bergman in the second season.
So, what are we going to do about it?
Negotiations continued throughout December 1975, with Morse initially rejecting an offer that would see him take a 33% pay cut, while also losing his transport to and from Pinewood Studios, and then making a counter-proposal that was also rejected.
I knew it was impossible.
When further attempts to contact Anderson himself proved unsuccessful, Morse then instructed his agent to accept the original offer, only to be told that other plans have been made. Barry Morse's diary entry for Wednesday, December 17, 1975, and thus his association with the series, ended with the words, "Space 1999, all over."
Goodbye, Alpha.
Aside from Landau and Bain, several other first-season cast members survived this mass cull.
Well, that's something.
Nick Tate's Alan Carter was retained when it was realised that ITC received more fan mail for him than any other cast member, and that it was important to keep 1 or 2 familiar faces around. However, the returning actors would find that instead of being under contract to appear in almost every episode, as had been the case during the first season, they would simply be called in to work here and there if needed.
You cannot mean that.
Are you asking to be relieved of duty?
No, sir.
This, coupled with a significant pay cut due to the second season's lower budget, caused in part by the loss of financing from Italian state broadcaster RAI, meant that Anton Phillips as Dr. Matthias would leave the show after just 2 episodes, and Xenia Merton, Sandra Benish, after 3, although she would later be convinced by Barbara Bain to return.
What do I do?
Freiberger's response to concerns about these sudden unexplained disappearances, plus those of Bergman and co., not to mention all the other cosmetic changes imposed on the show, remained the same. Nobody'll notice.
Where did this come from? What are you talking about?
And the most blatant example of this casual approach to maintaining continuity of characters came in the form of the replacements for Phillips and Merton, Jeffrey Kissoon, and Yasuko Nagazumi. While we'd like to imagine that it's just a coincidence that Dr. Ben Vincent and Yasko look very similar to their predecessors, it certainly fits with Freiberger's nobody'll notice attitude that this might have been a very specific casting direction. Providing they look a bit like the old characters and are doing the same jobs, who really cares which actors fill those roles?
Look, being cynical won't solve anything.
It helps keep the mind clear of personal emotions.
As if to confirm this, during the production of the episode The Mark of Arcanon, Jeffrey Kissoon was apparently unavailable to play Vincent.
Get Raoul!
And so replacing him for 1 week only was actor Raoul Nunez as Dr. Raoul Nunez, presumably so named because it only involved slightly more imagination than calling him Dr. Find Another Black Guy ASAP. Throughout the second season, the jobs of Moonbase Alpha's Deputy Chief Medical Officer and Communications Officer essentially became revolving door positions, as various actors came and went, and came back again, and then went again, hinting that perhaps the newcomers too found the situation as untenable as their predecessors. But it wasn't until production on the second season was almost complete that the casting process would dare to think outside of the Matthias and Sandra models for these roles.
Don't ask questions, just talk to me.
The romantic relationships between Koenig and Helena, and newcomers Tony and Maya, would also receive much focus in the new season.
We're now shooting the 15th one of our new episodes of 24. And I think the first year was spent a lot finding our way just in the material itself, trying to define the characters, not being terribly successful in that area, being successful in other areas.
I think the thing that I like best is there's much more humanity written into the series, thanks to the the addition of Freddie Freiberger to our family. I think there's more humor. The first series had a lot of very good things going for it, but I think it did lack some of the things that I felt were essential. For instance, Barbara and I, Dr. Russell and I, have a much clearer adult, physical, emotional relationship.
The commander and the doctor, who were sort of looking at each other across long corridors last year, have gotten much more, they're crazy about each other. How's that?
The addition of Catherine Schell as our resident alien and Tony Anhalt, and their relationship is a very interesting one and a fun one.
They're all a tremendous group to work with, so it's quite easy to fit in, and everybody sort of has made their own place within it, and it's been very comfortable.
We've now focused on the relationship of the people. We've found where to pull in humor, and generally speaking, have a good time with in between the dramas, and that's been very rewarding for all of us. It was what we were trying to do last year and couldn't find a way to shape it in or pull it in, and it's kind of great having a second chance to do that.
One of the things we discussed as we went along was the fleshing out of the people, and I feel that we have succeeded, and we intended to succeed in that area. So I think that there's many more levels to the character now.
We feel very good about what we've come up with this year.
But aside from the characters, other notable changes to the series included a new composer, with Derek Wadsworth replacing Barry Gray, and the loss of the expansive main mission set in favour of the much smaller command centre. This was another of Freiberger's suggestions, as he believed that a smaller, more enclosed set would give the show's characters a greater sense of immediacy to the viewer.
We've changed the uniforms. We have changed the physical setup of Moonbase Alpha to give it a more driving kind of physical feel. It looks more like Cape Canaveral or whatever.
But, as it turned out, the new set would prove visually restrictive for directors, hence perfectly constructed shots like this one, in which a prop takes up 1/6 of the frame.
That could work.
We hope that we're going to add to what we feel is a wonderful show, and one of the things that we would like to emphasize, which there's been a dearth of it in the first series, and we feel that it would be a big asset to add it to this series, is humor. We want to really get some fun into the show that everything in terms of the future isn't grim and serious and always facing death and destruction. We will also, we hope, round out their characters a bit more in terms of them being able to laugh, cry, and be able to be perhaps a little more human in their emotions. So we do want to sort of broaden the characterizations of our people, have them come across situations which could elicit some humorous remarks and perhaps have some situations in which they could react in other than a grim manner.
You're right, Tony. It doesn't have any effect at all. All I wanted was an honest opinion. What does an alien know about beer anyway? Give me that.
Again, this is an illustration of the humor that we do use.
All of this resulted in a series that made no reference to the first season at all, beyond the shared backstory that the moon was blown out of Earth's orbit by a nuclear explosion in the year 1999.
1999, the way this whole thing started, when the nuclear waste dumps blew up.
It's difficult to reconcile the two seasons as being part of the same series, thanks mostly to the cast changes and the switch from a vaguely metaphysical and spiritual storytelling approach to a more action-heavy one, and any attempts to do so in the scripts, such as explaining away Bergman's disappearance due to his dying in a faulty spacesuit, were dropped before they reached the screen.
I'm sure he'll survive.
Freiberger's arrival had also coincided with the departure of one of the most important creative forces in the Gerry Anderson universe, his wife Sylvia. Although the couple would not be divorced until 1981, their breakup at the end of filming on Space 1999's first season saw Sylvia also cut ties with the production entirely to pursue her own separate life and career.
Sylvia, of course, was there the first year. I loved her. She was great. She had a great kind of energy. And then, of course, they split. So it's the second season of Space, she was no longer there, and I missed her a lot.
Gerry Anderson was a man with big and exciting ideas, but many who worked on his shows have commented over the years that he didn't always handle people well, and that Sylvia was the person to talk to if you had a problem. Without her familiar presence to advise and reassure the team, the set of Space 1999's second season was reportedly a much less happy place to work than that of its first, with Martin Landau in particular being extremely dissatisfied with the poor quality of scripts like All That Glisters and A Matter of Balance.
I felt the show diminished the second season. I felt that the concept could have grown from that first year and become very interesting. We were beginning to find but the American ITC began to think more commercially. The Star Trek phenomenon started, so the Metamorph and those kinds of things started. I felt it corrupted the show. I never liked the second year nearly as much as the first year.
For his part, Fred Freiberger would listen to his complaints, but they only made him more convinced that the show was firmly on the right track.
You fool!
As always, the production was constantly subject to the whims of ITC New York, and the regular visits to the set of American executive Abe Mandel. On one such visit made early in the second season, during which he viewed several completed episodes of the show, he was horrified to discover that the series didn't include any monsters, which were apparently all the rage in American shows at the time.
We have on this present series a lot of monsters that we didn't have on the last series.
Accordingly, the Space 1999 production team began throwing together a variety of monster costumes which were soon terrorizing the Alphans on a weekly basis, until Abe Mandel made a return visit and demanded to know why all these monsters had been added to the show. Nobody in America wants monsters anymore.
Can't we stop it?
No, we have no control over it now.
When the second season began airing in autumn 1976, fans were presented with a new and improved Space 1999, but for many it was a significant downgrade from the show they were used to. Not only did all these changes occur without any on-screen explanation or even acknowledgement that the first season had ever happened, but the process of Americanizing the show had robbed Space 1999 of many of the unique qualities that had caught their imagination in the first place.
Wait.
It was now just another sci-fi action series, at times a reasonably good one, but for many fans, the magic had been lost.
The physical look, as I say, would be a more driving kind of a look, just as you view the show. You'll have a feeling of energy going with it.
The show had seemingly been fixed to the point where it had become irrevocably broken. As production began on the final episodes of Season 2, it was clear that there would be no Season 3. Despite all these improvements, the show had once again failed to sell to an American network.
Nothing we've done has had an effect.
Nowhere in the Gerry Anderson story is the power and influence of the American market more keenly or more tragically felt than in the story of Space 1999's transformation from Season 1 to Season 2.
First year, the whole essence of the show was a bunch of people who didn't belong in deep space. They weren't equipped emotionally, physically, technologically to be there. Star Trek, they go out there to do it. And we were thrust by an accident, a nuclear accident, into deep space. And the whole idea is that there are 300 people trying to survive, to find a planet compatible with our needs, in essence. And I love that concept. We got away from that the second year. It became more of a comic strip. I can only say that we tried to make that show as good as possible. We tried to keep the integrity up, and even in the second season, when I didn't agree with the changes, and fought with Freddie Freiberger often.
While many fans of both Star Trek and Space 1999 have pointed the finger of blame firmly in Freiberger's direction, his nickname of the Serial Killer is perhaps undeserved when it comes to 1999, since the series was essentially dead before he even arrived on the scene, and was only revived thanks to the addition of a character that he helped to create.
He's a wonderful man, I know him.
He certainly isn't to be entirely absolved from blame, of course, but the majority of it would have to be laid at the door of ITC America for failing to understand the series they already had and their decision to twist it into something it was never meant to be.
It's better to live as your own man than as a fool in someone else's dream.
Gerry Anderson himself also commented in the years following the show's cancellation that he regretted simply handing over the reins of the series to Freiberger and not standing up to the demands of ITC New York. although it's very hard to see to what extent he could have achieved the latter with any chance of success.
Resistance is futile.
While it may forever remain a poor successor to the first in the eyes of many fans, the second season of Space 1999 isn't without its charms. The problem is that, unfortunately, you sometimes have to wade through a lot of dross in order to find them.
What the hell went wrong this time?
Knowing that the second season we got came very close to not existing at all makes it hard to actively hate. Surely you'd rather have 24 more episodes featuring a somewhat different John, Helena, Alan and Sandra than nothing at all.
Don't listen to him. This is not John Koenig.
If I'm not John Koenig, who am I?
But for many fans, it's even harder to accept that such a unique and special series could be so traumatically reshaped into something that seemed so ordinary by comparison.
Why has all this happened to us, Professor?
The gods using us for their sport, perhaps.
But on the other hand, the second season did give us Tony Anholt hitting Dave Prowse in the Ghoulies with a fire extinguisher. You'd never get that in the first season.